Hey everybody! So I think we can all agree that buying a vehicle shouldn't be a stressful process, it shouldn't be frustrating, and it should be an exciting experience. Well, if you've been with us for any length of time, you know that we've purchased many vehicles over the years. A lot of these actually haven't been featured on the channel at all. Today, I'm going to tell you some of the horrifying, frustrating experiences that we've had at some of these dealerships. These moments of purchasing these vehicles went from exciting to downright frustrating in about 2.2 seconds. And I will give you a sneak peek that one of them is about the Silverado that we currently have. Buckle on up because I can guarantee you this is going to be a bumpy ride. So we're going to start out with the Volkswagen Tiguan fiasco. So we had previously owned a Trailblazer, a Chevy Trailblazer, you know, cutesy little car. It got good mileage, but it was really loud inside compared to our Volkswagen Jetta. So it was my commuter for a while, and so I decided that I would like to trade it. They had a great deal on Tiguans going on. There was a dealership in Denver who had one almost what we wanted, but it was at the price point we were looking at. And of course, at the time, the Trailblazer price went through the frickin' roof. Oh my goodness. We had purchased it for sticker, which was normal during the pandemic, and it had gone up by several $1,000s for us owning it. And with mileage on it and everything, we're like, well, this is a no-brainer. We'll go get the Tiguan and we'll get some money back because they're going to owe us money to buy the Tiguan. Seems like a win-win situation for us. We were super excited. Well, fast forward, the Tiguan finally comes into the dealership, but we were about to go on vacation. And so they decided, hey, you know what? Why don't we just drive it out to you? We'll meet you up about halfway between Denver and Delta. So we met up in Glenwood Springs. So we get there, and first of all, the guy who had dropped off the vehicle, it was a little stinky because he clearly was vaping. So we already knew we were going to have to clean the vehicle. But when we get to the paperwork aspect, they didn't have our check that they owed us. And he's like, oh, they'll be coming, they'll be sending it in the mail. And we're like, okay. So I took pictures. We had to write the "we owe you" part on there because they didn't have the check listed. So we rewrote that part and signed it and moved on our way, had our Tiguan and went on vacation. Well, by the time we got back from vacation, there was still no check. We ended up calling and getting the runaround over several weeks of them saying, oh, well, we can't cut the check until all the registration's done. I was like, well, that's strange because you've already sold the Trailblazer you owe us money for. So, as you can imagine, we're kind of frustrated at this point. They finally wrote us a check, and it took about 6 weeks for us to get the rest of the money that they owed us for that Trailblazer. The next one I'm going to talk about is the Ford F-150 registration nightmare. And we were really excited about this pickup. It was an FX4, it had all the package bells and whistles. It was pretty fancy for us. We had never really had a fancy truck before, so we were pretty excited about this purchase. The purchase went well. We got what we wanted for our trade. We left Utah, and then we came back home with the truck. The time frame, about 8 weeks, when the registration expires, came around, and there was no registration to be found. The county said that they had sent it back 4 times already for mistakes made by the dealership. Of course, we know nothing about what was happening because they don't communicate that with you. You just wait for your little registration card to come in the mail here in Colorado. We never got a registration card. The county told us that everything that they had messed up, which was different things over and over and over again. So we contacted the dealership and they said, well, you know, you're just going to have to run on that registration plate. We're like, it expires tomorrow. What are we supposed to do? Their answer was, oh, I guess you can figure it out. So the county told us that we had 2 options: have them send us a new registration plate, or we could purchase one on our own. Well, we were going on a trip, and so we knew that we needed some sort of registration on the vehicle. So we ended up buying a 3-day temporary tag to cover our registration for the trip that we were going on. And then the dealership ended up sending us a new temporary registration plate so that we could keep going until they finished the paperwork. About 12 weeks into this, they finally finished the paperwork and got everything to the county correctly. As you can imagine, it's really frustrating not being able to register your truck, especially when you're going on a trip and you want to be legal. You don't want to get pulled over. You want to be a law-abiding citizen. So the paperwork fiasco on that one, make sure that you pick a dealership that is credible, and if they're not, just stay on top of them from the very beginning. This one takes the cake, and it is on our new 2024 Silverado Custom Trail Boss. Now, I would believe that this is fiction if I didn't live it, so you're gonna have to go on this journey with me for this frustration. So this process for buying this Trail Boss was a nightmare from start to finish. And honestly, we're only a few weeks out of it actually being concluded, so it's very raw and fresh in my mind, and I'm still very angry about the whole thing. So let's get into it. So we purchased this vehicle back in the summer when Dane and I had decided, well, maybe we'll go full size for a while while we figure out what other mid-size pickup we would like to purchase eventually. So we've located one, we located actually a couple of them, and then we ended up trying to stay more local. We mean local, we mean Colorado and not Utah, just for reference. We went to this dealership that we had purchased from previously, which should have been my first red flag, is they messed up our paperwork the first time we purchased through them. So keep that in mind. That was red flag number one. We probably should have went and drove to Utah to purchase the same vehicle. Everything seemed smooth. We got the trade number after arguing with them a little bit. We got everything that we asked for, and we drove the truck home. Well, about 2 hours after we finally got home, we receive a call from the dealership, and the manager tells us, "Oh, well, I'm so sorry, but we screwed up your paperwork." And I'm like, okay, I guess that should have been expected. But he's like, well, we put the wrong trade VIN on your paperwork. Okay, you put the wrong trade VIN. So they needed to send us new paperwork, and they were going to FedEx us so that we could FedEx it back. And I said, okay, well, as long as we get a copy of this paperwork, that should be fine. We'll sign it. We'll send it back. It's not a big deal. Well, we get the paperwork. I sign it. Being the untrusting person I am, I took photos of every piece of paper that we had signed to make sure that we had a record, because I had a feeling that they weren't going to live up to sending us a copy. And boy, was I right. We have never to this day received a copy of that paperwork. Now keep this in mind because it's going to be important later. So about a month after purchase, I started going, hey, I need to look for the loan, make sure that everything is good, and prepare for that first payment. Well, when I went to the bank site, which was the same site that we had used previously for our other loan that was the trade-in was still there and not paid off, and the new truck purchase for the Silverado was paid off. Seems a little strange, right? So I called the bank and talked through a few things with them, and they said, oh, well, they've said that they were delayed because of paperwork, and so the trade isn't going to be paid off for about another week. And I was like, well, that's unfair for us. So they ended up costing us a little bit extra money because they didn't get the payoff done in the amount of time that they're supposed to. So there's another issue right there. And I asked them about the other loan. They said, oh, well, it was paid off the same day. You shouldn't have to worry about that. And I was like, no, that's my current loan. They're like, oh, don't worry, it'll come out in the wash. Well, I wait a couple more weeks, go back in and have to call the bank again because the truck loan for the trade-in was paid off, but then the loan was still paid off for the Silverado. So we had two paid off loans. I still owe money on the Silverado, so I need to get in there and pay for it. Come to find out that the loan was closed on the day that it was actually issued. So they issued the loan and closed it and paid it off. They said the dealership had paid it off. So color me confused. After getting my ducks in a row with the actual bank, I ended up calling the dealership. Well, that's where things went from worse to extremely ugly. When I called the dealership, I ended up speaking with the general manager of the specific dealership, and he was extremely rude. I told him that we were having this issue, and he said, well, there's no issues on our end. We don't have any red flags. You're just being paranoid. He's like, everything's fine. And I said, no, I spoke to the bank that the loan was issued through, and they said to contact you guys because of X, Y, and Z. So he ended up calling me a liar several times during that conversation, which I'm like, I'm just trying to be honest here. I'm trying to make sure that we're going to pay for what we purchased. And so after he got me quite frustrated, I said, well, I guess we just won't pay for it then. And he's like, oh, well, let me contact the bank first and find out what's going on. His bank contact said this was the biggest mess up he has seen in his career. The loan was so screwed up that there was no way to retrieve any of it. It was apparently a financial nightmare. Surprise, surprise, I wasn't lying. So the dealership manager ended up not apologizing, first of all. He just was like, well, we have two options here. He's like, you can either have us redo your loan, which will affect your credit score, or you could pay for it cash. What do you want to do? And I was like, well, I'm not going to let you touch my financial stuff anymore, so we're going to take the financial burden, figure it out, and we'll pay cash. And he's like, okay, well, I'm going to FedEx you an envelope. Oh, I'm going to send you. So he's going to send me a FedEx label to put on an envelope so I can send a check. And I was like, okay, cool. So he emails me the label, and I said, well, I'm not sending this until we make sure the title paperwork is correct. The title paperwork was done in the name of the bank loan. So they had to do a reversal process. So by the time they get their reversal process done, and we've called the third party that does all this, they're like, oh, it'll be fine, it'll be fine. And the county said, oh, they've received the paperwork finally. So that process took about 3 weeks for that to all get cleared up, but it wasn't cleared up. So after that was cleared up, I decided, hey, I'm going to send the check because I'm, good faith. I'm going to send the rest of the money for the truck. So I send the check, and the guy's about a week after that, he's like, did you send the check? And I said, yeah, I sent the check. It comes out, it was never picked up by FedEx. Something had happened, so I resend another check. Wouldn't you know it, that check got lost too. I'm telling you, this is stranger than fiction, but I can't believe, this is like the biggest mess I've ever experienced in my life. And Dane was so frustrated with it by the end of it. He ended up having to write an email, but we're fast forwarding. So back to where we were. So I offered them to be able to pay with a credit card. I was like, well, obviously this check thing isn't working. I will just call, pay with a credit card, and I will figure it out, the rest of the stuff out on my end, whatever. And the guy's like, well, you're gonna have to pay a 4% credit card fee. No, I'm not. No, I'm not. And I told him I'm not doing that. I guess we'll just keep sending checks until one finally goes through. And I told him, no, I'm not doing that. But he wanted his money that day because they're like, we sent all this stuff through. Well, come to find out, that cell phone picture I took of everything? It became extremely important because when the title and registration for the truck came through, but for the record, I had been to the DMV about 3 times at this point trying to get this all figured out and situated. Our county DMV is really great and they're really helpful, so thank God for them. But so I went and they said, hey, your name is wrong. And I was like, it is. They put Saram instead of Sarah on our registration and title. So I had those original pictures with the documents proving that we had put the paperwork incorrectly and that the third party the dealership uses to process registrations and titles screwed it up. Oh, they don't screw up is what the dealership promised us. Well, I'm here to tell you that third parties can't screw up. So the county was really nice. They decided that to not charge us the fee since we had the original picture of the paperwork. So they were able to correct that and we were able to go and get the proper registration name. And so now we have the correct title and the correct name for it. Back to the payment. So Dane is really frustrated at this point with the payment and everything. So he decides that he's going to email the owner. And the owner happens to be the manager's father. So this was going to get sticky pretty quick. So Dane writes a very comprehensive email about everything that has been going on, how we've been treated, and how that we were going to tell everyone about this piss poor experience that we've had and that no one should ever purchase a vehicle there. So the resolution Dane would like from this was that he wanted to have the dealership let us pay with the credit card because our check had been lost twice. We paid 2 check cancellation fees and had to deal with our bank several times. He writes this email, and about 2 hours later, after all of that, the manager comes back like, oh, you didn't have to email my dad. I'm so sorry. Maybe you shouldn't have been such a jerk. So all in all, we ended up being able to call, pay with the credit card, and take the financial burden of not having the loan and really have to scrimp pennies so that the truck would be paid off. So all in all, as you can imagine, through this experience, I can't believe it actually happened to us. So honestly, that is probably the worst experience I've ever had at a dealership. Of course, over the years, we've had several positive ones. And if you guys want a video about all the positive experiences and what dealerships have done right, let us know, because I feel like those dealerships I will name drop and I will let you know which ones of those ones you should purchase from. That's it. Those are our top 3 worst dealership experiences that we have ever lived through. If you had any similar dealership experiences, please comment down below and make us feel like we're not alone in some of this craziness that our dealership paperwork and dealerships just being bad. Probably the most important takeaway from this video is always be on top of your paperwork. Thanks for watching this video. Please like, subscribe, and of course, we will be right back at it here with some more truck content here soon. But we'll talk to you later. Bye.